If you are lucky enough, so let's go back a little bit. Okay, so you keep doing this, and especially if you move horizontally, there are products that in fact are going to be picked up by a lot of different industries. And if you're lucky enough that your product will be picked up, then you will get into something called hypergrowth. And the market doesn't need to be a 6 billion person market. A lot of smaller markets, you can go into hypergrowth. And the strategy in hypergrowth is going to be a bit different from the strategy that I just told you. So in order to focus, which is what you do before hypergrowth, you need to be one with the customer, right? You need to develop a whole product for a customer, right? And I said that customer has to have a name and a function and whatnot. Marry that customer. No plan B. You're going to marry that customer. Okay? So you're going to give that customer all the love you can. When you go into hypergrowth, basically in the life cycle, you focus and then you're going to go into that hypergrowth, right? The strategy is going to be basically to grow. The strategy, the goal is going to be to gain the largest market share. Why? Because in technology markets, in many, if not most technology markets, winners take all. Okay? If this, furthermore, is a market with network effects, then you know for a fact that there's going to be just one winner. Okay, if you make operating systems, if you make networks like Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, there are network externalities. There's going to be one winner in each category. Okay? No number two. So if you know that in your market there's going to be just one winner, what are you going to do? Well, that's who you want to be. And that's why you want to gain the largest market share possible. Now, how do you do that? My rule number 8, design easy to adopt products and services. As easy as you possibly can, as simple as you possibly can, but no simpler. Okay? So you need to simplify, simplify, simplify. And I guess in the book I write about the Skype versus Vonage example. Skype you download and you're talking to someone in 5 minutes. And with Vonage, at least when I was writing about this, you would wait weeks for this thing to come to your house and then you have to plug it in and there's no way that they could compete. No way, right? So I want to talk about 4 aspects of, hold your questions until I'll probably answer your question, okay? 4 aspects that you want to basically simplify on. 1, product design. Product design. So build and simplify the whole product. As simple as you possibly can. The whole product, not your product. Okay? So one of the brilliant things about the iPod was that despite the fact that there were 3 dozen MP3 players out there, no one had simplified the whole product. No one had offered everything, music player and downloads and the store and so on and so forth, the way that the iPod did. No one did. And that's why the iPod took off, as opposed to the Rio, the Creative, or all the others who were in the market a couple of years before Apple. So streamline the product. Do not, at this point in hypergrowth, confuse the market by adding all these features, okay? Do not re-architect the product in hypergrowth. Just don't, okay? The chart that I have here is Dig. Does anyone use Dig? Or the company formerly known as Dig? They re-architected this thing. They're not the first company to do that. And the first month after they did it, basically everyone became confused. Within a month in the US, 28% of users left. In the UK, 38% or so. Within a month, right? So if you want to destroy your growth, re-architecting in hypergrowth is the best, or one of the best ways to do that. Don't do this at home, right? No special or cool product extensions. And this is important, for companies that are venture funded. Basically, hey, why don't you take a team and build this for, American Express. It's a $10 million contract or a $2 million contract or whatever, right? It's a one-time thing, but it can inject revenues into the company. Big mistake, okay? Unless they happen to be your target market, okay? It's hard to say no in those circumstances, but you have to because at this point you want to focus in on growing. And when you do all these things, side projects, it's taking away from your, because remember, you're doing this and 30 other competitors are also doing it, okay? And if you think that you at basically 50% utilization are gonna be better than others at 100% utilization, you're wrong, okay? All right, now, if you have to expand horizontally, at this point, then the way you do it is you open it up. You open up the whole product and you basically have the market self-serve. Okay? And that's what companies like Salesforce have done with Force.com. They opened up an API that used their infrastructure, their software, so that instead of they having to do these special or cool products for special or cool customers, someone else would using their infrastructure. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is when you do it. Open it up so that others can self-serve. Google with AdSense did the same thing. So they opened it up so that folks could self-serve. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because this is something we think about a lot. When you're thinking about accommodating special requests,
yes,
like you just mentioned,
yes,
is there a bit of a balance there? Because we'll occasionally get clients who perhaps could be a banner client, or could pay us a significant amount of revenue that could possibly allow us to expand faster.
Right.
And the temptation is always there to say, yeah, sure, that's $100,000 right there that you could hire another developer for that. Why not just do it? So,
sure.
So where's the dividing line there? Do you say yes to some of those things?
You know where the dividing line is. You'll know it, right? Mm-hmm. You have to know it. If it takes you away from growing at, faster. If the market's growing at 100%, you want to grow at 120. You want to grow faster than all your competitors, because at the end, the one with the highest market share wins. Okay? Anything that detracts you from that, and we're assuming that you're in hypergrowth, that the market is in hypergrowth. So at that point, if it's going to detract you from that, then even though the temptation is there, you shouldn't take it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're in the early stages or whatnot, then that's fine, okay? then you have a bigger argument for doing those kind of projects. But in hypergrowth, that's the moment not to do it. Okay? Okay, operations. Now, I talked about product design. Make it easy to adopt and make it easy to grow. We know Skype because it's easy to adopt and download and so on. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Well, if you're Skype and you're going to grow at 1,000,000% because 1,000,000 people are downloaded it, then you better make sure that your infrastructure can handle that kind of growth. Okay? So from the infrastructure point of view, you have to focus on operations. You have to focus on making sure that, again, your goal is to gain the largest market share, which means you have to grow as fast as you possibly can. And, the example that I'm using here is Friendster, which, is the company formerly who could have been a contender, who, could have been Facebook, but, at one point they just could not deliver because of the operations. At one point it took 20 seconds to upload each page. So Friendster went from 4 million whatever to 0 in no time flat. Just because their infrastructure could not handle it, the growth. And isn't it sad that if you're at that point and that is the one thing that keeps you from winning the market. So here's the rule. Streamline operations to make your product as available and complete as many transactions, whatever your company calls a transaction, right? Could be a web page, it could be somebody who buys on Amazon, it could be, a Netflix round trip, it could be a Cisco $1 million router, or whatever. Whatever you call a transaction, streamline the operations so that you can complete as many transactions as fast as you can. That's the rule. Okay? So different companies, like I said, have different definitions of what a transaction is, of what is important, and so you need to work on that. So, for Netflix, it was a round trip, a DVD round trip. That was a transaction, okay? And, they were the company that took it to like a day or less. Dell, in its day, had the top supply chain infrastructure in the industry. YouTube, one of the reasons that they beat Google Video is that their infrastructure was better able to, actually it was several other reasons, but that's one of them. And one of the reasons that YouTube used to constrain videos to 4 minutes or 6 minutes was because they knew they couldn't handle anything bigger than that. Okay? Whereas Google Video, I loved Google Video because I could upload an hour or whatever. But that's not, what ended up working. I like a company called Sungevity. Sungevity has what they call remote solar designers. Basically 20 designers at their office doing rooftop developing solar PV from the office using both public information and photos that they have, private information, and so on. And according to them, these remote solar designers are as efficient as going out there to the rooftop and putting feet on the roof. You can't beat this, okay? And they could put a solar PV system anywhere in the US without visiting. Does that make sense? This will help them grow faster than any other company. Of course, there are other measurements of transactions, right? Okay. From the sales point of view, Focus on signing up as many customers as you can. So those companies that have actual stuff that you sell, Cisco systems, bikes, solar PV, whatever, close as many transactions as you possibly can. Don't lose transactions. Okay? Because one customer in these markets, if you're in the PV market, one customer that you lose, that's 20 years. Gone. That's a customer that's gone for 20 years. Okay? And assuming in 20 years they're going to re-up, are they going to go back to a different company? And the competition. Protect your core business. All right? Even as you expand as fast as you possibly can, protect your core business. First of all, know what your core business is. Okay? So, 2003, 2004, 2005, thereabouts, Yahoo versus Google. Yahoo is a search company, was. How do they outsource search? I still don't get that. How does a search company outsource search? Does anyone get it? I still don't, all these years after. Okay? So, protect your core business. Okay? Did I mention focus? Focus. This is the moment when you grow very, very fast. Focus on your business. Okay? Question?
So question about protecting your core business. So the example of Yahoo is kind of, self-destruction of core business. But let's say that you kind of maintain the status quo of your core business. Do you just have to keep maintaining the status quo, or you have to...
No. Protect it. Status quo is death in high technology. Okay? Status quo is death. Now we're talking about hypergrowth. Okay? You protect it, you do whatever you can. New technology, compete hard, new markets, all that good stuff. Protect it.
Meaning make sure that your core business is continuing on the...
Yes, you develop, all the value that, you keep creating value and capturing value, right? I mean, that's the yin and the yang. Creating value and capturing value. And you keep doing that, okay? And don't outsource your core business, please. Right? It may save you 10% cost in the short term, but boy, it can come back to haunt you. All right. So at the end of that curve, at the end of that hypergrowth, at some point, whatever the size of the market is, whether it's 1 billion or 1 million or 100,000, you'll come to a point where half the market has already adopted. Okay? So you've gone from the 10% or 12% to the 50%, and that was the hypergrowth. And at some point, you can't, there's no such thing as infinite growth, right? So when the market comes to about 50%, what does that mean? It means, at best, it's going to grow by another 100% in forever. Does that make sense? So you've gone, or the market has gone, from hypergrowth, 40, 50, 60, 100% plus every year to 100% possibility over the next who knows how many years. So the growth curve goes from this to this. Does that make sense?
100%
per year to 100% for the next whatever number of years it takes for the second half to adopt. Now the second half, by definition, is the more conservative half, which means it's going to take much longer for that half to adopt than the first half. Does that make sense? So you're looking at 10%, 8%, 12%. So from 50 or 100 to 10%, right? So at best, the market will double in terms of users in terms of customers. At this point, the winner has probably emerged already. Okay? So what's going to happen in hypergrowth is that the market will likely consolidate into a winner, maybe 2 companies in some markets, maybe 3, right? But the winner is probably there. Prices and margins will go down because for a couple of reasons. One is that in hypergrowth, remember that I just said, about 10 minutes ago, that you have to build the infrastructure to grow as fast or faster than the market itself. Well, guess what? If 30 companies have done that, that means that the market has built overcapacity, right? So at this point, there is way overcapacity, which means that a lot of these companies will slash prices to survive. Does that make sense? Prices will go down, costs will go down. A lot of companies are going to write off their capital investments, but they're going to want to, recover, quote unquote, as much as they possibly can. Yes.
How does the emergence of the iPhone hypergrowth relate to the consecutive releases of, let's say, the 4S? They phase it out, they wait to release the next version, but it does keep growing. So when would you say was the hypergrowth, and when?
So good question. Is the iPhone a category? What is the category?
Smartphones.
Huh?
Well, it's in the league of smartphones.
Do we call it smartphones? Do we call it cell phones? Do we call it mobiles? What do we call it? So what's the category, first of all? No, it's a good question. But so part of what, my message is, it's not about your product, it's about the market. Yeah? It's about the category. So in this case, it's the smartphone, let's call it the smartphone category, right? So the question is, what's the question again?
So for iPhone, with them, and this could apply to any phone, but iPhone being more common.
Yeah.
When do they go from version 2 to 3 to 4, 4S?
Yeah.
I thought the 5 was coming out, they said no, it's 4S.
Yeah.
And that's right around the time when Steve Jobs died and whatever that had to do with it.
Okay, let me answer that in a slide or two. Okay, that's a good question. But the one thing that I'm going to tell you is it's the smartphone. It's about the smartphone. It's not about Apple. The fact that they are emerging as the winner. Notice that I haven't said they have emerged as the winner, right? At this point, it's still a contest between who and who?
Samsung.
Android and iOS, right? That at this point, that is the big battle. Okay, Symbian is as good as dead. BlackBerry is as good as. I don't want to, these are public companies, so I don't want to say that. But basically, if you look at Nokia's market share, it's going about 10% down every year or so. They've gone from 50 to about 10. Good choice of CEO, right? Wait, I didn't say that. So anyway, so at this point, it's a battle between iOS, Apple, and Android, and all the Android phones. Which one is going to emerge as the winner? Well, the category is still growing, isn't it? At, 100% plus. And in fact, it's actually eating up into other phone categories, okay? Subcategories. So the winner has not emerged just yet, but I'm going to answer your question in a second. So what is your strategy? What is your strategy at this point? The strategy is increase usage from existing users. Okay? So the battle for new users is going to be tough because it's going to be a slow market expansion. So go back. Now, this is the strategy if you're the winner, okay, or one of the companies that are emerging as the winners. So increase usage from existing users. So develop new revenue streams from existing users. That's going to be your quickest way to earn revenues and so on. So sub-segment and develop product line extensions. This is the moment when you do that. Came out with iPod Shuffle and Nano and Classic and Touch. Once it was clear that Apple was the winner, then they started sub-segmenting the market. So that when you were going to buy a new MP3 player, you were not going to look at anybody else. You're going to upgrade to an Apple. Okay? This is the moment when you do it. Sub-segment and go after all the segments in the market. Does that make sense? Okay. LinkedIn, that's the moment when they developed all these services. Business Pro. You give us $20, we'll let you talk to 100 people. You give us $1,000 a month, and we'll let you talk to anybody you want, right? I mean, this is LinkedIn, isn't it? And so they segmented the market, and those were revenue streams from existing users. And Intuit, and so on and so forth. Another strategy is to develop or acquire complementary products. And so that's when IBM goes into global services. This is when Oracle goes into consulting, or it goes out on an acquisition spree. It buys PeopleSoft, and it buys Demand CRM, and it buys Seba, and it buys all these other companies to build on their databases. Does that make sense? Another thing you can do is open up and develop a platform. So far, I've said focus on the whole product. Because at the end of the day, that's what people are going to buy. They're not going to buy a platform. But at this point, open it up. And if you can develop a platform, then do it. Okay?
What's that mean?
Huh?
What do you mean develop a platform?
So in the case of Apple, for instance, they opened it up so that folks could develop applications for the iPhone. They did their best to do the best whole product and so on. And at that point, it was, they couldn't develop 500,000 applications. So open it up. That's what they did, right? Google, AdSense, Facebook is doing that with apps also. Zynga, I think, is doing that with games, so that other game developers can develop apps for Zynga, right? It's brilliant, and this is the point when you do it. Okay. If you're not a winner, and it's clear that you're not a winner, then what do? Change. Sorry, Charlie. Go home. Cry a little bit for a day. Then come back, get over it, and pivot. Okay? Change your strategy. Because at this point, the winner, if it's not clear, there may be one or two winners. Right? So in this case, iOS, Apple, and Android. Okay? Anybody else should probably go home. Except if you're Microsoft and you still want to invest $10 billion in this market, which it's probably worth it, and you have a Nokia to do it with, then it's worth it. So, if you're not a winner, reposition your product. Reposition relative to the winner. So go back to day one when I talked about positioning. Become the service company, the reliability company, the low-cost version. Okay? But don't ever say we're better than. We're the cheaper version with the higher quality version, and so on and so forth. go out and look for market segments or verticals where you can win. Market segments could be either geographically speaking or other verticals. So when after Oracle, it was clear that they won the database war, Informix went out and they went to Wall Street. And they said, you know what? Oracle is not good enough for you. You want 99.99999% uptime. We're the only ones who can give you that. Okay? So basically that sustained Informix for a long time. MySpace, after they lost versus Facebook, they decided to focus on musicians and artists. I don't know how well that worked, but basically refocus on a vertical that you think you can win. Another way to do it is migrate to complementary products. And that's what companies like Creative, after they lost the MP3 market to Apple, they came back to develop all the aftermarket products, whether it's speakers or headphones or sleeves or whatever, right? Migrate to new product categories altogether. Apple itself, people forget that in the late 90s they almost went bankrupt. They lost against the Wintel platform, right? And they had to migrate. They had to migrate to new product categories. And the one that worked was the iPod, right? They had to do it because they lost. The Mac lost or had lost. Change your business model. So, Netscape, when they lost against Microsoft Explorer, they became a portal. And then they became an open source browser. So they changed their business model. Sugar CRM, open source CRM, right? So change business model. Or totally shut down, get out, go home, and do something else. Okay? And this is what a lot of companies end up doing with products that don't work. Google is pretty good at that. Doesn't work, shut it down. And they've shut down video and short messaging and answers and so on. Take those resources, put them to work in winning products. That's the right thing to do. So, in one slide, this is your strategy throughout the life cycle. First, you focus until build up strength, find a market that you can win, laser focus, win, meaning grow as fast as you possibly can, and repeat. Keep doing this in adjacent markets and so on. This is your one slide adoption life cycle slide. Questions? Simple, huh? So, tell me about the iPhone. Are they doing the right thing now? Now that you've seen it go through the life cycle?